very, gosh, so different, but all very powerful. I am really interested in the ways in which students are positioned in all of your work, because it's very different in all of them. And most specifically, let me make sure it's right. I'm looking at all the different people that you cited. Most specifically, Kristen. So students were the thing that I found, not that this is a deficiency in any way, because you did an amazing job of talking about teachers and policy and sort of this broader perspective. But I think all of your work has sort of profound implications for students on a very personal level. And so I'm wondering where you address students or how you address students through your research. Although you did talk a little bit about sort of socioeconomic issues, but
Sure.
so essentially, I guess, what do you see as the effect of your research in particular on students? Like, I could super envision, you know, how it would affect the students that you're talking about, knowing more about sort of the context and when they're coming in and what can be done in the future. But because you have so complete of a picture about sort of other folks.
Well, it's probably because I had to do this in 20 minutes and my presentation was originally 40 minutes long. So, you know, but really the way it came out today kind of almost is like, seems to be like a metaphor for how it felt teaching, because of the way in which the policies were kind of coming down and coming at us and everything that we were having to do. You know, like the days that I mentioned that there were many days I spent my time proving I was a good teacher on paper instead of actually being a good teacher. Like often what got neglected was the phone calls home to talk to parents, you know, the immediate feedback for the students, you know. Instead, what I was doing was recording their scores over on this sheet here that I was going to submit to the Department of Education. But they aren't missing from my dissertation project. Part of that literature review that I said had to be more than a literature review. What I'm doing is I'm looking specifically at how accountability reforms impact historically marginalized students, schools, and communities, so that I can balance teachers' narratives against that, so that I'm not like creating these narratives that are just exacerbating this oppression that's already in existence. So I've done research looking into how accountability reforms impacts students of color from low-income communities. I've started to look at how it impacts English language learners and students with disabilities, which the interactions between, you know, those three groups are very complex. You know, it certainly has exacerbated the tendency to like put students, for instance, in disability programs or into special education, you know, while at the same time though, it's also highlighted the need for more attention to what is happening with our special education students. So it's like this constant tug that is happening between these students and these policies and these different groups of students. So it's not missing, it's definitely not, it took me some time to get back to there. I think probably because I had to like work through the experiences of what I felt in the schools. I mean, I left teaching. I worked at my school as a long-term sub for about 6 months that year that I was subbing. And then I took the job at my school, and then we had 3 principals in 3 years, a data scrubbing scandal, 2 new evaluation systems, Senate Bill 5, and all of these things that happened. And so by the end of it, I was just like, I am not doing a service for these students. I wasn't prepared for, there's no way that my licensure program could have prepared, you know, Dr. Savage is here. I went through the high stakes licensure program. There is no way that our licensure program could have prepared me for that, but I wasn't, you know, and I miss my classroom, but it was just, they're not coming first right now in this environment, you know, and what I'm trying to navigate, so I did leave. But yeah, kind of the way it came out today kind of like impacts the way it felt.
Well, and so can I just add one more little question? So all three of you, your presentations really, for me, really dramatically emphasize the ways in which our location, our place, whether that's sort of cultural or geographic or regional, how much that affects who we are as learners and what we learn. And for example, you know, I mean, I don't fish, I don't hunt, but I really saw how that student became so interested in sort of revealing what he was learning through these artistic processes. And I can really see how the students that you're working with, you know, the fact that they are existing in such a different cultural milieu and how that is affecting the way they learn and what they're learning. I guess that's going to be sort of more of an observation, but also where does that sort of, how does that affect your thing? I mean, no, that's not even the right question. It's just remarkable to me that so much of it is based on this like very intimate aspect of learning.
Yeah, I believe, yeah, I agree that also. I think location is very important element in my research. There is a Korean and Chinese famous sentence, a frog in a well that the frog don't know outside the world. And even though we have internet and everything, but for example, China blocked Google or Facebook and Gmail, and also even New York Times, they cannot read the articles in China. And it's interesting, if they came to the United States, they experienced totally different elements in news and their kind of government's kind of problems or that kind of thing. They can see them objectively after they're moving to the United States. They can read New York Times and articles. Yeah, and also, yeah, that's also an interesting moment, and also location is very important in my research. Yeah.
It's definitely important. I mean, rural students right now, it's like a really underrepresented demographic, which is interesting to study. And a lot of place-based research only covers, you know, ecological or environmental aspects of that. So really tapping into this demographic was important for me. But and that really influenced my approach to the curriculum, as well as the Carrie, the teacher that I worked with, how we approached it, how we talked to students, bringing in regional artists, not just talking about, when we talked about art integration, ones, you know, the bigger names you would read about in a survey class, but also the ones that were doing things in the region, and not necessarily just that were place-based or anything like that, but any of them, and bringing it in there. Because that was something, they don't have a museum, they have one small gallery. It's not a very flourishing art community there. But also going back to your question, I wanted to state too, is taking a diverse group of high school students and individualizing the curriculum, in guiding them through that process of becoming artist researchers, taking students that are at all different levels. And that was something where we were placing, Carrie and I were placing a student, and we realized it would be very difficult with 18 learners to do just one of us. I mean, we worked together really well. It was a true collaboration, and I want to emphasize that. It wasn't just me going in there to research. I took part in it. We talked, we planned, we reflected, we really worked together. I mean, it was the perfect scenario, so in that sense.
So it would be what I would want for your students.
For my students, yeah, exactly. Well, you know, it's so funny because Tehran and I, we have the same advisor, and we started off taking some policy classes together, like at the beginning, and kind of, we've both been so immersed that we haven't really heard what we're doing. And then, you know, we started to present these, and I went first, and then Tehran went, and it was just like, oh, there you go, you know, but not that Miami-Dade has all of the solutions, but they have some pretty darn good ones when you look at them and you know, closely. But yeah, and thinking about place, like I think, you know, one thing that I am really excited to do is to actually get out there and start talking to teachers. I'm someone with, well, discourse analysis is going, you know, but I'm learning as I go too. And I'm talking to teachers from multiple districts in Ohio, and multiple teachers from each district. So I'm really interested to see what happens when I'm out there. Like the union arguments were a lot bigger deal in northern Ohio, where they're part of the Rust Belt, than they were in Columbus in a lot of ways, and so like what happens throughout the regions and then what happens within those schools, because my school had very different kind of circumstances when I was teaching than a lot of other schools in my district. I mean, I'm looking at large districts, so it will be interesting. And after this, like I'm already thinking ahead, I haven't even finished it, but I really would like to kind of immerse myself in a community and be talking to the teachers, the parents, the students, to everybody, and doing the same kind of work. Like, not a megaphone, that's not a good metaphor, but something kind of like that,
Maybe just a speaker.
A speaker, yeah, putting voices in contact with each other and with others, so, yeah.
So Karen, at the end of the break, gave us the assignment to come up with questions that all three panelists, so this is my attempt at it. So all three of you, I think, are talking about lived experiences, as Dana, I think it's sort of transitioning from Dana's question to like about being very place specific and that experience of place, but also lived experience, right? But then also there was elements within all three of your conversations, Jin Young, more in your response to Dana, about how media digital media in particular, plays a role in part of that. So Kate, you were talking about using the internet, right, for research, and how that played a role. Kristen, you talked about the media and the narrative that's being produced, right, through the media. And then Jin Young, you were just talking about like how the openness of society also affects people's views of living in the U.S. maybe before they came and then after being there. So maybe could all three of you talk about media and lived experience as it relates to your studies?
Sure, I can
You go ahead.
with ours especially, it was one of the emerging themes that became one of my claims was today with students and just using their mobile devices. And in our class, almost every student had a mobile device. In the school, there's a bring your own device policy. So it's up to the teacher's discretion if you want to allow your students to use it, how you want to use it. I mean, 'cause that's a fine line right there, is what they can use, because the district server blocks a lot of things. And that was something that was very problematic when we were researching in the computer lab, on our computer lab days, it just was, the students couldn't do what we needed them to do, because it was a blanket policy on the schools for social media, which data can come from anywhere.
Right.
It's not limited to what the school claims is. I was completely, yeah. So what was great about that was that we started to realize that how important it was and how to utilize what the students already had, what they knew, and bring it into my research. And that was something that they wanted to do it, and B, they were already doing it secretly. And that's why it was out in the open, and we could monitor it more, and people didn't abuse it. I mean, we had no texting, but the greater good kind of, we looked at it that way. So using it during presentations was something that I noticed at Penn State when I was just in teaching with as my graduate teaching assistantship. When I was talking about an artist, you'd see students online looking it up to learn more about that. And I would walk around the room and I would see them using it to look up more about that artist to add to the conversation. So it really created a nice dialogue for our class that brought people in too that might be a little uneasy about the information that they had, but it could solidify it so they could have a voice in the class as well. So I found it as an entry point into the research, and I would have loved to expand upon this, but when I started to realize the significance of it, starting to utilize it and expand upon it, the study was over. So for me, it was a really interesting way of approaching research in a high school classroom, art classroom, that I don't believe exists yet.
For me, I think like kind of the juxtaposition of the media, and for me the media mostly means the news media, and lived experience is going to be coming during the narrative inquiry portion, because I'm conducting this discourse analysis first, and then I'm going to be interviewing and working with teachers over a course of like 4 to 6 months, if not longer. And I have kind of a topic schedule. You know, these are dialogic interviews, but you know, the first is kind of understanding where they come from, who they are, you know, how they became teachers, how policy impacts them, and you know what their classroom experiences are like, and then moving on to kind of looking together at some of the media discourses about their profession. So it's going to be, that's where I'm going to start to kind of juxtapose and like learn from them how they experience it. I mean, I can say that I experienced it in a way that was, I was already struggling, you know, in, I mean, I remember my second year, I had one class that had 42 students, an ASL interpreter, and a classroom aide. And so, you know, I was already struggling, and then to hear, like, see images like, we must fire bad teachers, like, am I a bad teacher? You know, so I know for me it was a real struggle, but I don't know what it'll be like for, you know, my participants. So I'll be interested to learn about that.
Yeah. I think digital media deliver the new knowledge and also idea, and that has also power of critical idea and critical thinking, and that's very important also in my research also with the cultural background. Yeah, for example, in Korea and in China, we are very westernized now, but we don't know what kind of culture influenced to our culture. I mean, if we don't know the original origin or other knowledge, and now Korea is more receiving more the Western knowledge, not more. I think so because the Chinese blocked American TV programs also. They blocked Korean TV programs also because Korean TV programs very getting popular in China, and they blocked the Korean TV programs in China now. And they are keeping nationalism now, and they don't allow to receive Western culture elements. But they are, I mean, receiving more and more now, and they are changing. And I think we need to, I mean, learn more knowledge through digital media because they can deliver very directly to them. And I think that's also valuable for kind of democracy, that kind of thing, because we can share that. Also, I think rural students, actually, that's less privileged to receive more high-tech and digital media, I think, than like New York. New York has very many programs in Columbia University, and also MIT, I visited there, and they provide many educational programs for children and students, and that kind of thing. I think, that's the difference level of understanding and knowledge that, I mean, maybe that they'll provide some different level of understanding and knowledge.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I was really surprised, not that families have such a say in, you know, students coming to the United States. I mean, that seems like a fairly reasonable thing, you know, that your family, if they're supporting you and they're helping you in your education. It just, I guess what really surprised me is that people are so supportive of sending people to the U.S. for art in particular, it sounds like. And is it because of the fact that there's perhaps more access to certain kinds of information in the, like, what's the relationship between art and the United States that these sort of Chinese families are sending their kids over here for?
Yeah, mainly actually the society wants more international artists.
Okay.
I mean, even, for example, when they hire professor, if they don't have a degree, international degree, actually it's not possible to become professor in Korea and China now, because it's like maybe America, actually, in America, many English degree, I mean, very old days, I mean, English degree professors in the United States, it's like that. I think we have to earn the American degree to become professors or famous artists in their home countries. Yeah, that's kind of requirement, kind of. Yeah.
So I would like to open it up to the audience here and anybody that is looking at it. Apparently there are 45 people that are viewing this from afar, and panel 1 and 2, we're up to 96, and Dana and Ryan, 154. So, but you know, those questions when they get posed, you can check real time and see the questions in relationship to the presentations. In the future, you can do that. So alumni, if you're looking at this, please post those, because I think the presenters would be very, very interested in that. And as well as anybody sitting here. Also, I want to encourage you to share. Once I shared this, you know, anyone who comes to my timeline in Facebook, they're going to check this out. So, way to grow, okay? So, I'm just opening up maybe about 5 or 7 minutes or so for some questions from those that are out here.
There is no one. So I have a
Anita?
I don't know if it relates to what you're researching. My question is for Kate. I really loved your presentation, and I'm thinking about art integration, but I'm just wondering how would it look like in other classrooms. Like, let's say if you're learning about fish in biology, how could you bring art in there?
That was something, yeah, that we, one of the things I was thinking about how to expand upon this study was working in more of a transdisciplinary way. We did work with a science teacher and a history teacher, or 2 other ones, and my goal was to have even more, and that just didn't come to fruition for various reasons. Time constraints was the main one, because I did try to get more of the high school teachers on board, but the schedules were really difficult to accommodate everybody. But working even with 2 people and having them, getting their expert input and seeing that this was possible. I think exposing some of the teachers to this idea and having them just stir that buzz to get the idea of how might I be able to do it in my classroom, and expanding upon that and working with them. Because a lot of these teachers too were teachers I worked with when I was in the district, so I knew them. And we felt comfortable together to talk, to dialogue about these different things. And that was definitely one of the things I think that could be expanded upon. Does that answer kind of your question? How the next step in this research could be to gather a team to make a transdisciplinary unit of potential. Would be the way I would look at this. This was something I really would love to do something like that. So yeah, and how would they bring it in? How would they bring art in to their curriculum? And not just so it was just colored pencils or the things that, you know, a science teacher, I'm not trying to say all by any means, but that didn't have the exposure to how to do it. Kind of like how I might bring in science or math to my curriculum without really understanding the content. And that was something too, when I was here doing my coursework, I took a lot of science education classes. And I had never done that, and I learned so much about how the other disciplines, the language, the methods, what their struggles are. You know, in art education, we talk about our struggles. What are other academic struggles? So having a thorough understanding of art integration, and if you, for me personally, even though I've taken a lot of science courses, I didn't feel comfortable necessarily teaching science. So I definitely worked with somebody that knew the answers to those questions, especially for the students. And then I went to a math teacher if there was anything that was specific, but we didn't have any. The science was the real one that was like a heavy-hitting discipline that I noticed the students interested in with art.
Thank you.
Later, would you like
Yes. So my question is for Kristen. Well, I think it was amazing, your presentation.
Thank you.
So my question is going to be related to teacher licensure and related issues to that. And before that, I also want to tell you that I relate to your personal experience because I myself am coming from a similar background. In New York, from New York.
Oh.
So some of you may be familiar with these mechanisms, like systems for teachers in order to be licensed. One of them is the Teach for America, and then the other one is Pearson's at TPA.
Yes, I have.
And yeah, so I'm very familiar with TPA.
Yeah, RISA is very similar. It's like an expanded version of it.
Okay, yeah, so, and I also just recently heard that Arizona is like another state. They're starting to implement these mechanisms and systems. But as a result, there's also this kind of issue. I think it's coming from the schools and teachers, these policies and kind of like demands, I want to say, and the amount of work that is put on teachers are now leaving teachers without, like they're not able to complete those tasks because there's so much demand, and also leaving them with a lack of kind of skills, it is said. So in the future, how do you feel that those policies, do you think it will affect humanizing teachers or humanizing a teacher accountability?
You mean like
Generally
in terms of like my research as a humanizing?
Yeah, how would you,
I don't know. I mean, I'm hoping that like humanizing means, that for me, like Molly Blackburn says, that you're reasserting your humanity, you're reasserting that, I am not an object, I'm not a number, kind of thing. So I'm hoping that just the process of like engaging in a, reflexive, reciprocal exchange through this study will help teachers, feel that. I don't know that it will. I mean, I'm hoping. I will say that those policies, the EdTPA, I don't know so much about in terms of like, I didn't have to do that. But RISA was similar to EdTPA in that I had to videotape myself twice. I had to fill out I had a manual that was 120 pages for RISA, and I was the first group to go through it. So they had switched from Praxis to RISA. So the group that was like in between that year, they didn't have to do anything to move on to their permanent license. Everybody else had to, my group then had to do RISA. And I will say that like, it wasn't just dehumanizing for me, that like I passed that on to my students, and I know I did it. This is what I say when I mean I felt complicit. And there's research on burnout in other service fields, like if you're looking at social work or if you're looking at, mental health fields, that talks about the depersonalization that happens when you are overwhelmed and can't meet the burdens that are set upon you. You depersonalize your clients in those instances, or your students if you're a teacher. And that's one thing that I don't feel like there's not enough research on, is that interaction between what happens with when a teacher is overwhelmed by these policies, is dehumanized by these policies, and the deficit thinking that they become trapped in. Maybe they had never challenged themselves in that way, or maybe, they are, voicing that as a protective response sometimes, and maybe it's both, and so that, I guess, would be another whole new area of research, and maybe some of that will come out in my interviews.
Okay, let's take a break and reconvene at 4 p.m. for our last panel, panel 4, informativity.